What if I told you that there's a brand new tool out there that can potentially make coding easier, faster, more accurate, a tool that might just turn you into the elusive 10x developer, a tool that never existed before very recently? Well, that tool might be the code interpreter by ChatGPT. And in today's video, we're going to discuss how this code interpreter works, why it might be this game changer, and some very interesting potential use cases of it so far. So first off, what is this code interpreter? Well, as we can see from the OpenAI docs here, the code interpreter is this alpha plugin or alpha model. It's an experimental ChatGPT model that can use Python. It can write its own code. And here it kind of goes on to say that they give it its own Python environment, or they give it its own sandboxed, firewalled execution environment along with some disk space. So this basically allows them to run Python code in this kind of boxed in environment. And the code run by the interpreter plugin is evaluated in a persistent session that is alive for the duration of the chat conversation. It does have an upper bound timeout, and subsequent calls can build on top of each other. We support uploading files to the current conversation workplace and downloading the results of your work. And here it goes on to show an example of how this code interpreter works. So they basically ask it a question here, and the question's going to need it to do some math. And you can see the ChatGPT code interpreter plugin here. It imports some different modules or some different packages from Python here, and it goes on to create a couple variables here, and then it solves the problem and it shows you the result. And this is pretty wild that it knows how to import the specific packages. It creates different variables and solves the problem here. So it writes all this code on its own in its own programming environment. And then they go on to describe, we would like most of our models to be able to use their programming skills to provide a much more natural interface to most fundamental capabilities of our computers. Having access to a very eager junior programmer working at the speed of your fingertips can make completely new workflows effortless and efficient. So right now, they're basically comparing their code interpreter plugin to a very eager junior programmer that can basically solve these tasks just on command, which is pretty crazy. And I think that to me right now, that feels like a pretty accurate description, in which it's like, if you're a more kind of mid-level, or even if you are a junior programmer, even having a assistant that's also a junior programmer, that could be helpful. But especially if you are maybe a little bit more senior, having a junior assistant that can solve these sorts of problems and just offload a lot of mental overhead for you to focus on like the most complex problems that you're working on, I see that providing a ton of value and a ton of productivity to an overall team. And then it goes on to say the use cases that they see the code interpreter, and I'm going to show you some examples of these here in just a second. But the use cases they see is solving mathematical problems. So that's what I would kind of qualify this one up here as. And then doing data analysis and visualization and converting files between different formats. So if I kind of scroll down further here, they have this video. And in this video, they show some examples of them asking different questions to the interpreter and seeing the result. So they ask it to plot a certain function, like 1 over sine of x. I don't know, it's been a minute since I've done some math here. But in this, you can see that it calculates it here, and it even has a button to kind of show the work. And my guess is that if you click on that, it would show you the Python environment it's working in and the actual code, which is pretty cool. And then you can see the output. It displays this graph to help you kind of visualize this mathematical function here. They ask it to kind of zoom in to different values here, and you can see it zooms the chart in right away, which it just does this in seconds. So this is pretty wild here. And then there's one other thing I really want to show you here in this that is pretty cool. And here it kind of takes a CSV and answers some different questions about it and writes the code to answer those questions. But I'll show you some different visualizations here later. But you can see it shows the top 10 most frequent artist names of that like CSV of music that it just had. I want to show you this one right here. So here what it's doing is it's got this image, and it's a pretty large image. And they're like, hey, can you make it 4 times smaller? And in the matter of seconds, it takes this image and resizes it to be about 4 times smaller. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm a web developer, and one of the common goals that we have with a website is, generally speaking, shipping as little code to the browser as we can to still have a good kind of UI and UX for our user. And one aspect of that is not shipping huge images to the user and making sure we have small file sizes. So often we need to resize all of our images to smaller ones. And if you're able to use this to just like say, hey, I want you to convert this image to an SVG and resize it to be as small as possible while not losing quality or different things like that, that's stuff that is just like tedious work that takes some time to do, especially if you have, dozens of images for your site. But with this, it would literally take seconds. So this is just one really good example of where a web developer could use this to improve their productivity very quickly. But let me show you a couple of other examples. So for the next example I want to show you an example of doing data visualization. And this comes from Twitter. I actually don't have Twitter, and I just kind of saw these online in different articles. But there's this post by Ethan Malik in which they basically show how you can do these different data visualization techniques. And this is all within the code interpreter plugin here. And they basically said, generate some artificial data and then show some charts based on that data. And you can see all these different charts that it kind of has here, in which it even shows like a heat map, different bar charts, a tree diagram, a Venn diagram. And you can see all these kind of different charts that it shows here. So pretty kind of wild ability to do data visualization. And in this next one, it does the same thing. It takes a Spotify playlist, it analyzes it, and then it kind of creates different charts and different kind of data science things. It creates this kind of like dot plot here of the listening and just a bunch of different like more kind of statistic-based analysis on this music, the 300 hours of Spotify favorites. So pretty good at data visualization. And then it's also good at like creating different files and especially GIFs. So here, Riley Goodside, and the second image I showed you was from Schlom's, just to give credit there. And then Riley Goodside, they say that they basically had their interpreter create this animated GIF. So it was basically able to create this like matrix GIF based on the prompt that they gave it, which is pretty cool. And then in this next one here, they also create a GIF, but what they did was they uploaded a CSV file of every lighthouse location in the USA. This is probably my coolest example here. And what it was able to do is create this GIF here of the different lighthouses in the USA, and it makes them all like twinkle here. So I'm not sure if it's coming through very well for you guys, but it is showing these twinkling right along the coast here, which is pretty dang cool. Like this would have taken some time to do in like any other situation. But not only this, but it can also edit videos. So here, if we look at Riley Goodside again, you can see after these prompts, it kind of gives it more of a static kind of GIF or image here. And then it has it like say, hey, can you do like a slow zoom on this image? And that's exactly what it does. It creates this image here that does like a slow zoom, which is pretty wild as well. So you can see ChatGPT already having use cases of resizing images, data visualization, data science, creating GIFs, video editing, and doing this all within its own Python environment. And this is just scratching the surface. This is still in like alpha production. I don't have access to it, or else I'd be creating some cool stuff with it. And I think that this is definitely going to increase productivity for developers. And you can already see it doing stuff that would take, hours, if not days, in a matter of seconds, which is definitely going to make people more powerful programmers. And if you want to make sure to stay up to date on everything coming to programmers and stuff that I'm trying to stay up to date with, make sure you're subscribed, because I will be doing my best to kind of cover that stuff, because it's going to force me to stay up to date with it as well. So thanks for tuning into this. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll catch you in that next one.